Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here or on the phone for our quarterly TSAC meeting. I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Madam Secretary, can you call the roll?
Jamie Simmons.
Here.
Mike Kraus.
Here.
Claude Presnell.
Here.
Courtney Hess. Josh Testa.
Here.
Greg Turner. Commissioner McQueen.
Here.
Dr. Lemming.
Here.
Dr. Martin.
Here.
Cyrus Vattendost. John Smorelli.
Here.
Charles Harper.
Here.
Tom Hughes. Sharon Hayes.
Here.
Carrie McGinnis. Charles Lane. Madam Chair, we have 13 present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. In front of you, members, there's an agenda, and so can I have a motion to adopt our agenda for today?
So moved.
Moved by Claude Presnell, and a second?
Second.
Second by Sharon Harper. Madam Secretary, can you call the roll?
Jamie Simmons.
Aye.
Claude Presnell.
Aye.
Courtney Hess. Josh Testa.
Aye.
Greg Turner. Commissioner McQueen.
Aye.
Dr. Lemming.
Aye.
Dr. Martin.
Aye.
Cyrus Vattendost. John Smorelli.
You got to sit at the table.
Aye. Yes.
It's a rule.
Charles Harper. Tom Hughes. Sharon Hayes. Carrie McGinnis. Charles Lane. Madam Chair, you have 12 ayes.
Motion
Get it
passed.
straight.
In front of you as well, you should have the minutes, the TSAC board minutes from both the September, I'm guessing we're doing September because we did not adopt those, and the April board meeting. So after reviewing those, is there a motion to approve both the September and the April board meeting minutes? Thank you. Motion by Greg Turner.
Seconded.
Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Jamie Simmons.
Aye.
Claude Presnell.
Aye.
Courtney Hess. Josh Testa. Greg Turner. Commissioner McQueen.
Yes.
Dr. Lemming. Dr. Martin.
Aye.
Cyrus Vattendost.
Aye.
John Smorelli.
Aye.
Charles Harper.
Aye.
Tom Hughes. Sharon Hayes.
Aye.
Carrie McGinnis. Charles Lane. Madam 12, you have 13 ayes. Motion passed.
Great.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, what'd I say?
Madam 12.
I did not.
You did. We'll move on.
So as many of you know, the governor has less than a year left in his final term as governor. His focus over these next 8 months is absolutely going to continue to be on completion. I think we would say we've done a lot around, and thanks to the leadership of this board as well as the leadership of higher ed, done a lot to really focus on access and how do we increase the number of students who are thinking about and then going on to post-secondary. And so we know right now the numbers are still pretty clear about our completion rates. At our 2-year institutions, we are still graduating about 1 in every 4 students on time. And then at our 4-year institutions, overall, we have about a 1 in 3 graduation rate for an on-time completion rate. And so we truly believe that while we have a limited time left, we really can do better by our students to get them to completion on time. Or what we're going to see, we believe, is more adults with some college but no degree, and adding to that kind of 900,000 figure that we have right now, maybe more. So the governor did put forth a bill this year that did not pass, but it did require, it would have required students receiving the Hope Scholarship or the Tennessee Promise Scholarship to complete 30 credit hours in 12 months. We were obviously disappointed that it didn't pass, and some might have said this was punishing students. I think our viewpoint really was, one, we're trying to be good stewards of state dollars, but also knowing that what we've seen in K-12 is that when we raise expectations, students rise to meet those expectations. Very much they rise to meet the expectations that adults set for them. And so our goal here was to raise expectations, believing really that students would rise to meet that. And so unfortunately it did not pass, but I think the underlying statement here is we want to continue to see a culture change around on-time graduation, and really pushing our students to find more avenues to completion as opposed to find more avenues to stay longer and then thus have more pathways to drop out, unfortunately. And so I think I'm just thankful for the leadership around this table. I'm thankful for the work you all do every day and for your service on this board. And I just ask that you continue to think about how we can continue to improve our culture around on-time completion and pushing students to that, knowing that the longer they stay in the system, one, more opportunities to drop out, but also there's additional tuition they're paying as well as lost wages for not being in the workforce. And so with that, we're excited about today's meeting, and I'll turn it over to Executive Director Kraus to make his comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of points, and I'm actually going to cede the bulk of my time to one of our team members to give an update on the Tennessee Reconnect rollout, which has gone extraordinarily well. Just a couple points. One, want to thank our staff as always. Legislative session for TSAC is in some ways, we have kind of a dual TSAC role. TSAC often bears the brunt of legislative session because so many legislators have legislative ideas around financial aid. And so I'm very appreciative to our staff for weathering that storm. Also want to thank our staff. There's a pretty big gathering every year that's very important to kind of our enterprise, which is TASFA, the Tennessee Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. That was last week. That was basically a full-time endeavor for several members of our staff, including Leah. It is an invaluable time to get financial aid officers in a room together and talk through how we're going to implement the programs that are developed by this board. And so thank you to Leah for her leadership on that. I had a chance to speak to the room. Some of you were there. Again, it's a really unique group. It's every single financial aid director from Walter State Community College to the University of Memphis and Milligan College. And I think one of the messages I delivered to them was thank you. We have not had a shortage of new initiatives the last few years. And every time we have new initiatives, the financial aid directors kind of roll with the punches and make sure we implement well. We're appreciative. The other message was, we do need to keep pushing. And to echo your comments, I think that the failure of that legislation should not signify the failure of the effort. And everybody agreed, I think, at all points, on balance, 15 credit hours a semester is the ideal place to be. I think we should continue to talk as a board and as an agency. What are the ways we can incent that? What's the campaign we can wage to make sure that students, when they walk into that advising office, their default mentally is 15 hours? How do we train our advisors to gently nudge? And I think stay tuned on that. We'll be working with TBR, UT, the LGIs, Dr. Presnell, on how to implement in a campaign approach that I think can also be very helpful to move us towards the goal of more efficient usage of financial aid. Different subject, but one that's probably the most exciting thing going on right now. I'm going to ask Jessica Gibson to please take the podium. We were the first state in the nation a few years ago to offer tuition-free community and technical college for recent high school graduates. Several have followed suit since. We are now the first state in the nation emphatically to ever offer this to adult students. And the Tennessee Reconnect campaign began on February 15th. Jessica Gibson and her team, it is a great example, I think, of how THEC and TSAC really operate seamlessly, because so much of this was Jessica working with James Snyder, working with Tim Phelps. And the result is we can tell you now a lot about how many people applied and what we know about them, and Jessica's about to do that. What I would just say to wrap up is none of these applications really have an impact unless we get them on campus. And so that's a dialogue we've had with Chancellor Tidings and her team. The work that's been done at TBR the last 6 months on adults has been pretty remarkable. If you're an adult calling one of our campuses, you get routed directly to the Reconnect point of contact. I think that's very crucial. And we will, of course, bring you an update next fall once we know how these prospects convert to actual matriculants. But for now, I'd like Jessica to give us an update on what our applicant profile has looked like and what sort of activity we've seen. Jessica.
Thank you. So I'm going to provide a Tennessee Reconnect update to you today. And as Director Kraus mentioned, the application for the Reconnect grant actually opened on February 15th. And along with the application opening, we launched a marketing campaign. And this campaign included television commercials, which I hope that all of you saw, billboards, as well as digital marketing. And the message was pretty clear. It was apply now. There's no better time in the state of Tennessee to go back to college or go to college as an adult. What we did is we directed them to the tnreconnect.gov website. At the very top of the website, there's a red banner that says, click here to apply for the grant. We wanted it to be as easy as possible and as clear as possible. And we provided 4 steps for any applicant. It's completing the Reconnect grant application, applying to your local community college or eligible institution, filing the FAFSA, and enrolling in a degree or certificate program at least part-time. We have surpassed 14,000 applications. This is really good news. These are great numbers. It's better than we expected. And at the height of the marketing campaign, we were really getting 200 to 300 people weekly. It's kind of slowed down a little bit, but we have a great number of people here who have applied and are interested in returning. So I want to tell you a little bit about the application itself. The application itself is simple. It is almost exactly like the Promise application, but it has 10 to 12 additional questions that have nothing to do with eligibility, but have everything to do with us trying to identify some student support needs up front. What happens is the student fills out the application, and as soon as they hit submit, a PDF is generated called a Reconnect Success Plan. So every applicant gets a Reconnect Success Plan. And what it really is a resource map. So they answer questions related to access to reliable transportation, whether or not they have internet access, access to computers, whether they have dependents, whether they plan on working, what they feel like their challenges may be. And we match up their answers to what their institutions have told us they offer in certain areas for a student. So the point of this, and the reason that we think this is a good thing, is because it sets forth at the very beginning connection to actual human beings on campuses in different areas that these folks might be interested in or might have need in. We also plan to have continued communication electronically with Reconnect grantees or applicants, and we're in development stages of that. So what the Reconnect Success Plans and the questionnaire have also provided us with is a picture of the applicants. And so I want to share that with you today as well. We know that 57% of applicants have dependents that they are caring for. This is a big number. 86% plan to work while they're enrolled. When we dig into that a little bit more, of those who plan to work, 66% plan to work full-time. 30% plan to work part-time, and 4% plan to work multiple jobs. I want you to keep these numbers in mind as I kind of go through some more numbers. 90% have internet access at home. I think this may be telling us actually a different story. It was very surprising that 90% would have internet access at home. What we think might be happening here is those who have filled out the application online have internet access at home. But we have areas in Tennessee that still struggle with internet access, and I think that we need to keep our eye on this number. We asked when they prefer to take classes. Surprisingly, 49% said that they could take classes anytime, daytime, evening, whenever, which doesn't really match up with the 66% that are planning to attend full time. Again, something we either need to adjust in our questioning or keep an eye on when we're communicating to students about availability of certain programs. 27% combined prefer nights and weekends. When you really look at that number though, 26% prefer nights, 1% prefer weekends, which is also kind of a big surprise to us. 24% prefer online programs. I think this is very important considering that the Reconnect grant doesn't, unless things have changed, doesn't currently cover online fees at the moment. So
Fee on top of the tuition.
the fee on top of the
Covers the
tuition.
course.
Right, exactly, yes. So when we talk about reconnectors, often we tend to think of those with some college but no degree. What we're seeing, though, is at least a third of those applicants have no college history. So we're reaching people that haven't been to college before, and this is great. We think that we're reaching a group of people that we were wanting to. 37% have some college experience, 28% currently enrolled. I think the surprising number here for me is the currently enrolled, and it may be that those that are currently enrolled may just not know that they might be eligible for the Reconnect grant as well. So we'll continue doing outreach and working with the institutions on that. And then we ask them to report their annual income to get an idea. And what we see here is that 44% of the applicants are making $25,000 or less a year. 72% are making $50,000 or less. And then finally, we asked them what they thought their challenges might be, and we provided a pick list. These are the top 4. Finances, which is interesting, but it really does, it really aligns well with what we know about adults. This is a grant that pays tuition, but it doesn't pay books or supplies or mortgages or transportation costs or childcare. And those are costs that adults think about when they're going back to college. So this is still a concern for a lot of adults. Family responsibilities, work demands, and time management, because that really aligns with 2 and 3. What's interesting, I think, is what's not in the top 3. The other choices that they could make had to do with academic preparation. It had to do with physical or learning disability. It had to do with accessing campus resources. It had to do with using technology to do coursework. So again, just to understand what adults' concerns are when they are coming to campus. And then finally, as we look over the next few months, we want to see who is eligible. So what we know is that of those who have filled out the Reconnect application, 80% have also filled out the FAFSA. Of those who have filled out the FAFSA and the application, 79% are eligible according to FAFSA. However, we don't know how many may owe a balance to an institution. And as there has been recent legislation on this, I think we just, again, need to kind of see what that looks like as we move forward over the next couple of months.
Jessica, are you saying that 79% are eligible for Pell? Is that what they're eligible for?
They're eligible they're eligible for the Reconnect grant. So they don't have a previous degree earned. They qualify as an independent student. Am I missing anything?
So it's basically just looking at the flags that would make the flag that makes it.
So of those who are ineligible, these numbers are interesting. So 28% are not independent. So that's about 650 students right now that don't qualify as being independent according to FAFSA. 16% actually already have a graduate degree, and 17% are in default. So about 401 students are in default on student loans, and that makes them ineligible. So this is another opportunity to reach out to students and help guide them through that process. Over the next couple of months, as Director Krause was talking about, who ends up enrolling and who ends up persisting from fall to spring. These are data points that we will continue to track. And then finally, how do institutions respond to an increase in enrollment from adult learners? What are their observations, and what changes or adjustments do they make as a result? So these are all items that we're going to be looking at and tracking over the next few months.
Of the students that have applied or potential students, do you have something that would be able to share with us what areas of the state, so we could see if it was, and I'm sure you do with data, and I may be jumping ahead of what you were going to say, but is there a particular sector of the state maybe that has had more applicants than others? And then that would also lead to the question of wonder why that is, you know.
So we could actually put together a map for you to send. We could send the map out to you. Yeah.
Just verbally, though.
Unsurprisingly,
Yeah.
it's the metro areas. The metro areas have the highest application rates. There are some of our rural and distressed counties that have very, very few applicants. So it is, there is an uneven distribution of Reconnect applicants across the state. So I'd be happy to share that with you all.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, we will do that. We'll send out a map to the board as a follow-up. The urban areas being an intense area of applications, not that much of a surprise. Some of the, think Putnam County and Madison counties of the world that aren't the most rural counties, but they're also not urban, I think did okay as a percent of their population. I got to tell you though, I mean, Shelby County, this is a big deal in Shelby County, and their mayor and the governor did a co-release, essentially taking the brand and launching Shelby County Reconnect, which I thought was brilliant. And so we know we had an inquiry a few weeks ago about, I think it was either Lake County or Obion County. Those are the counties that probably need this the most. We didn't have the penetration in those rural areas we had hoped for. We had an applicant from every county, though, correct? There were no counties with zero. And I'll take that as a win when you've got some really tough counties to work in. Somebody applied from everywhere.
And of the 401 students that are in default on their loans, is there something that could be done to reach out to them, to encourage them to get back in good standing so then they can apply?
Yeah, so there may be things that we could do that TSAC and TSAC could do together, but we have our Tennessee Reconnect Community Navigator program. These are community-based navigators, and they can actually reach out to these former students who are in default to try to connect them to the right information so that they can take the steps that they need to take to get back in good standing. So we don't want to just leave those that are in default to the side. We want to.
So they can do that, but will they do that? The navigators.
Well,
right? I understand you right. So the navigators can do that. So will that be an effort done by the navigators?
Yes. So we have I think our biggest issue would be capacity, but yes, that is part of the plan.
It's part of the checklist, I guess you would say. Are you in default? Can we, just some of you may know, getting back in out of default's not the toughest thing ever. Sometimes it's getting a very small payment option going. One of the capabilities we have lost here, though, by losing the federal loan portfolio is to have our own loans division, which we're currently, as you all know, in a wind down posture on. If I could pivot and ask Dr. Lemming a question. So what happens, I know we've been pushing the applicant info to you, but then the campuses have also been able to pull them directly, correct?
Yes, through eGrants.
And our impression, because we've seen it, is the campuses they're working these lists really hard.
I'm concerned about the limited involvement in the rural areas. Do you think the limitations on rural broadband has anything to do with that, or is there a direct?
So I can't, confirm that at all. However, with our conversations with the folks that we work with in the communities, they think that is part of the reason. Yes, that it's an access.
Are there alternatives that we could pursue?
So I think that this push has helped us see some opportunities in how we might be able to partner in sort of the FAFSA frenzy effort, how we may be able to leverage colleges and high schools perhaps to use the computers to apply. And those are issues that we want to look into more and see how we can reach out to more people that way as well.
And we've got 14,000 applications statewide, and I guess that number is growing. What is the universe do you have an estimate on how many statewide? Is it that total 800,000 number, 800,000 or 900,000 people that have
some college, no degree? Mm-hmm. Well, the numbers, depending on how you look at them, are between 750 and 900,000, and I feel that is still fairly stable. So the 14,000, some of them have no college experience as well. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Well, it's a good point. And I mean, one thing is we're going to be reliving some of the Tennessee Promise days all over again, because you all will remember during Promise implementation, we didn't have a measure because no one had ever done it. Reconnect even more so, at least with Promise, we had Tennessee Achieves as a touchstone. Reconnect is a whole new cloth initiative. I think the point probably lurking within your question, though, is, 14,000 of those who matriculate, we still have a lot of work to do as a state to continue to reach them. One of the things I'm struck by is of the 14,000 that apply, it's so different than a promise student, because the promise students typically applied because their school counselors brought them into a room and said, apply for Tennessee Promise. These adults made a very intentional decision. I'm not so sure we won't see a little higher yield on the 14,000 versus the promise cohort being a 60,000 applicant pool that ended up being 16,000 matriculants. I'm kind of optimistic about that. And then we may end up being the dog that caught the car, because Dr. Lemming and her campuses will suddenly wake up one day in the fall and we'll have a lot of adults, which will be a great problem to have, but could be a challenge as well, right?
I was just going to say, one of the things that we are working on right now is on that default piece. If a student owes money to a TBR institution and is seeking to get a transcript so that they can enroll under Reconnect at another TBR institution, we're developing a policy now where that money that's owed would be waived so that they can get their transcript and enroll in a TBR institution, and a payment plan would be developed where they can pay back that money to the original institution in a timely fashion, but that wouldn't prevent them from enrolling and using Reconnect. So that is something that we're working on right now for implementation this year.
You said TBR is leading the charge on that?
Yeah, we had legislation that passed that is enabling us now to have a TBR policy within TBR institutions to do that.
Maybe UT will do that too.
Well, there really won't be any eligible students at a UT institution for this particular grant.
Okay.
Now, I would say this, though, and truly, the talk about going to college for adults, I promise you, there are some UT, some college, no degree applicants whose antenna are now up. UT Martin arguably it's between UT Martin and MTSU on the public side who have the best adult degree completion programs. So I do think there'll probably be some second order effects there, but they're not a direct recipient the way either the TBR schools are or the few 4 years with an associate degree.
I would have expected that there would have been a lot of activity from metro markets, as you mentioned in your report, but I'm a little surprised there wasn't more applicants from some of the rural markets, not the smaller rural markets, but the medium-sized, so to speak, rural area counties. That's interesting. But maybe they didn't have somebody in those.
Like Jackson, Madison?
Yeah.
Or somewhere.
We've
But
had
I don't
that.
know. Yeah.
We do have that, yeah. The Jackson Madison area, for example.
Well, and does
But I'm thinking about like Monroe, Polk, Southeast Tennessee, some of those markets, and maybe I'm a little bit more familiar with that because that's the area where I grew up. But still, that's interesting. Maybe it's because, to what we were saying about Tennessee Promise, the guidance counselor champions Tennessee Promise, and there's not somebody, because it's new, to champion this new program. So.
Well, and we do have our Reconnect community navigators, but we just have triage services in that area of the state right now. So.
Jessica, I might have missed it, but did you share to what extent these individuals do have some college under their belt?
Yes, I believe it was 37%.
And do we know like the amount?
We
roughly?
don't. No, we didn't ask
Okay.
that.
Okay.
I know the institutions will have that information closer to the fall.
Okay. All right.
I just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, because as Mike mentioned, or Director Krause mentioned earlier, Tennessee Promise was brand new, and that was a lion effort. And so thank you to you and your team for the effort, because it's one thing to help students go through this, but it's another thing with a non-traditional or adult student to encourage them to do this and move forward. So thank you.
It's not a job to me. This is wonderful.
Calling.
What we're doing. It is, and the state is really supportive, so it's fantastic. Thanks.
That concludes my report.
All right. I will turn it over to Charles Harper to give us an update on TASFA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. TASFA had 4 goals in mind as we began our 17-18 year. One was just continue our professional development for training of our members across the state. Since our last meeting in September, the TASFA regional training was held in October. on the 31st, and then on November 1st and 2nd in West, Middle, and East Tennessee. So we actually, in partnership with TSAC, go through the 3 parts of Tennessee and hit the areas in which financial aid administrators can go to a selected location to receive additional fall training on different things. So we held that at Union University in Jackson, Trevecca University in Nashville, and Johnson University in Knoxville. We had 175 financial aid administrators take part in one of those 3 sessions, which included a federal update, state updates, and then NASFA credentialing, which is the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators. Out of that, a fourth of our attendees did take the NASFA credentialing and earned a credential in campus-based programs. So that was at the end of October into November. Our TASFA annual conference and 50th anniversary was held just recently in April, the 22nd through the 25th. We had over 300 TASFA members join us for that. For 2 years, 4-year publics, 4-year privates, proprietary, and the TCATs. All members attended that. We provided 5 general sessions, 30 concurrent sessions. And then TSAC staff himself provided 1 general session in which Executive Director Krause, Tim Phelps, and Diane Lejean presented to our members, as well as 5 concurrent sessions in which TSAC staff presented to TASFA members as well. So I'd like to thank you for your participation in that. I'd like to thank Tim as well for allowing Leah to step outside of her TSAC role and assist TASFA in our 50th anniversary and annual conference, which from all I'm hearing was a great success, and everyone had a great time at that. Our second goal was just strengthening our working relationship with TSAC amongst TASFA. Many years, I don't think our membership realized the communication that takes place between TASFA and TSAC. And so I created a TASFA advisory chair for 17-18, in which Dick Smelser served as our chair for this past year. But the communication efforts remained ongoing this year as we worked on all the changes that were presented, not only on the legislative floor, but just in changes of Promise and Reconnect as well. So those were ongoing, and I feel very fortunate that hopefully this TASFA advisory board will continue for the 18-19 year. Another goal was support TSAC's outreach efforts, definitely with the drive to 55 and everything that the governor had planned. And so October through January, there was a collective effort between our member schools and TSAC with the FAFSA completion dates. I sent volunteer reports to Diane Lejean so that she could reach out for the FAFSA frenzy so that our members could actually go to the schools as well and assist in that. And so that was well received. And our fourth goal was to actually have State Hill visits. Unfortunately, scheduling did not allow us to really visit the state, the Hill this year, but our TASFA Governmental Relations Chair, Ron Gamble, was there often and kept the TASFA board as well as the members informed of all the changes that were going on the Hill. So that is my report. I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to serve on the board this year.
Thank you so much, Charles. All right, we will move to our one and only decision item for today. If you go in your packet to the colored tab, it should bring you directly to that decision item, which is the selection of the 2018-19 officers and committee members. And I will turn it over to Peter Abernathy to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the perfunctory annual selection of officers that we fill each year. These are both officers and committee members. On the following page is the list of those members that are recommended for your approval for the 2018-19 year. And we would recommend passage of this as currently constituted or currently presented.
Is there any discussion or question on this?
Yeah, the audit committee, I'm no longer chair of the audit committee. Sharon is the chair.
Okay.
So if we could correct the ballot or whatever you want to call it, I don't know, the slate,
right,
and have, I'm more than thrilled
I would
to have. How many years was I chair? Yeah. many, many moons. So if we could, yeah, you're welcome. And I was honored to be chair, but I'm also honored to have my colleague be chair. So Sharon Haynes.
Open. We'll memorialize this edit in the minutes.
Okay. Any other changes or questions to the membership besides changing the chair of the audit committee?
Make a motion, we approve the officers and committees as they've been slated
With that change?
with that change.
Great.
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Perfect. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Madam Secretary, can you call the roll?
Jamie Simmons,
Aye.
Claude Presnell,
Aye.
Courtney Hess, Josh Testa, Greg Turner, Commissioner McQueen,
Aye.
Dr. Lemming,
Aye.
Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Cyrus Vondost,
Aye.
John Smorelli,
Aye.
Charles Harper,
Aye.
Tom Hughes, Sharon Hayes,
Aye.
Carrie McGinnis,
Aye.
Charles Lane. Madam Chair, you have 13 ayes. Motion passed.
Great. Thank you. All right, we'll move into our discussion items for today, and I think we're kicking off with James Snyder, who's going to give us a Tennessee Promise Scholarship update. James, you're welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, Executive Director Krause, members of the board. I just want to bring you guys a brief update on the Tennessee Promise Scholarship Program. I'll start with kind of a recap of the last three cohorts, and then we'll briefly look at the high school cohort as we move through the pipeline, and then we'll finish up looking at our investment numbers briefly. So as just recapping that cohort 1, 2015-16, the inaugural group, if you will, 16,300 students matriculated. 15.2 million was the cost on year 1. Then as you look at cohort 2, the 2016-17 academic year, looking at those numbers, 23,761. That was our both cohorts combined. And as you break that down, cohort 2, and as you see, we continue to grow, which is fantastic news. But 17,148 in cohort 2. The renewals from year to year, and as I reference renewal students, it's important to know that when I reference from a TSAC administrative perspective, we're referencing maintenance of eligibility. Whereas if we hear something from TBR or from a TACUA, we may be looking at maintenance of enrollment, which is a different perspective. That's a fantastic number, but administratively we're looking at maintenance of eligibility. So a renewal of eligibility of 6,612 students, so roughly 41% of students year over year that maintained eligibility, with a total cost all cohorts of $25.2 million. Cohort 3, year to date for the 17-18 academic year, 27,066 recipients, 17,782 year to date for cohort 3. So our fall 17 initial enrollees. We had 1,553 students that remained eligible from the initial cohort of enrollees that were still finishing out that 5th semester of eligibility. We have 7,802 students from the initial, from that second cohort. So that's a 45% retention of eligibility year over year from cohort 2 into that third year. Okay, and the year-to-date cost is $27,075,000. So just rounding it to 27, we're projecting costs around 29, and that's conservatively 28.5, but we're still looking at 29 from a budgetary perspective as a total cost at year end. Okay, so that will be at full maturity, total cost roughly $29 million. Yes.
And just anecdotally, so I'm going to be at the Motlow commencement on Saturday, and out of their 1,100 seniors, 640 are Promise grads. So of the 1,100 graduates, and don't get me wrong, I'd say Motlow is probably the highest intensity. Pellissippi's a close second, but it definitely shows that the flywheel is spinning here on Promise at this point.
So then looking at the same three cohorts from a different perspective. So we looking at average awards, fall to spring retention, fall to fall retention, a little bit more there. So average award in cohort 1 was $935. Broken down, so they're looking at fall to spring retention at 67%, fall to fall retention at 41%. the success rate, and I'm going to have to plug, these are Tennessee Board of Regents, and I got the executive summary. Dr. House shared that to me that Russ had presented. So it's kind of snagging some of his numbers there, but 52% success, TBR specific. Now, as we look at that 16,300, that's representative of 82% of the cohort that attended a Tennessee Board of Regents community college. Okay, so it's a very important distinction there. We're looking at 52% success, and as you break that number down, 21.5% completed an associate degree or certificate. Raw numbers, that's 2,857 students that completed that graduated. Then you got 20.6% that were still enrolled, that they're moving into that sixth semester, anticipating, we hope, completion or transfer on to another institution. And then an additional 10%, 10.1% that have transferred out. Okay, so they're still enrolled at some institution, but they're not currently enrolled in a Tennessee Promise or at a TBR institution. So that's an important distinction. When you look at the 21.5%, and this is tremendous, compare that student, that Promise student that completed the associate degree, you compare that to a non-Promise student at 8.3%. So it's a tremendous thing it's a tremendous figure. It's a tremendous applause point for Tennessee Board of Regents and their efforts in this initiative. Cohort 2, average award of $1,062, fall to spring retention at 72%, fall to fall at 45%. The average award did jump slightly, but then as we look at cohort 3, and I was running these numbers prepping for the board report, and this was quite surprising. 27,000 recipients, $27 million expenditures, average award of $1,000. So the award has gone down. So that's, as enrollment's going up, costs are going down. So it's a good thing from a budgetary perspective as we're looking at this. Fall to spring retention is 70% to date. Anticipating the summer coming out, and we're still fleshing out a few more falls, a few more springs as we find students that are changing institutions, so on and so forth. Now, looking at cohort 4, this is our high school cohort, class of 2018, 62,000 students submitted, 62,570 submitted an application. This is 3% year over year increase over the 2017 class. So still representative of roughly 83% of a public school population. So we're still in that 80 to 85% range where we have remained. FAFSA completion data at 55,126 students, tremendous number. 88% of the applicant population submitted their FAFSA on time. And this does factor in a 1-week extension due to weather and illnesses that we were dealing with across the state. So the initial deadline was the 16th, I believe it was, so we did extend that to the 26th. We just got in our mandatory meeting updates, so we're looking at 40,000 students, 40 and a half, that have attended their scheduled meetings with AIRS or Ready or Tennessee Achieves. From that population, now we're shifting gears over into the community service submissions. So students' next step is submit community service by July 1 and then matriculate. Okay, so we'll start receiving data on the July 1 deadline, usually mid-May. We'll start getting reports in from Achieves and Ready and AIRS to start looking at that, and then projecting our fall 17 enrollment. Okay, yes, ma'am.
So, if I understand this correctly, we lost 15,000 people between January and the February, April. 15 decided it's not for me, I'm not doing the next step.
Yes, ma'am. So often what we're seeing between the initial application, oftentimes the effort is every student does this because we don't know what your financial aid picture looks like. So that's why we see 80 to 85% do the application. By February to April, they've seen their FAFSA. A lot of them are starting to receive their award letters from their top choice school. Maybe it's Belmont as an example, and Belmont's not a Promise eligible institution. They've gotten a financial package that's amazing. So they say that at that point, Promise isn't something that I'm going to pursue, and so that student chooses to not attend the mandatory meeting. And so at that point,
about the same as it has been, that
yes.
ratio, I should say.
Yes, ma'am.
Over the last couple of years.
Yes. So last year it was roughly 38,000 that attended their meeting. So it's in the ballpark every single year. It's been there. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when you have this incredible level of saturation, I mean, this is like incredible saturation. You're going to have large fallout just simply because a lot of them filling it out actually are thinking, I'm actually going to go to a 4-year institution, enroll in a 4-year program, not a 2-year program at all. So, it's this is really what you should expect, to take place. But
Yeah, I would argue the thing we need to focus on are the 12,000 students that didn't even apply to Promise and wondering what's going on there. I think this should probably say 17-18 public, right?
It
And
should.
fall
Yeah, forgive me.
2018
Yeah, so
enrollment.
that number's in the
Okay.
same ballpark, but yes, that should
Okay.
reflect 17-18. And then from the 40,000, we'll see, I think last year it was 38, and we saw roughly 22,500 that did the community service. And so that same attrition is the student that has then has finalized their package. Decision day was yesterday or the 1st. And so they've made their decision. They're enrolling at a Promise ineligible institution. And so at that point, they've decided, I do not officially need to use Tennessee Promise. And so from the one thing that's most surprising to me as I look at these numbers every year at this pipeline, where are the students that did the community service that then didn't enroll at a Promise institution? That's the number that's always surprising, is to see where now some of them are going to be at a TACUA or a 4-year institution that's eligible, and they've just chosen to pursue a bachelor's degree program. But then the others, they were using it literally as their absolute last resort. They're following the instructions that we're giving them. That's the best guidance I can give a student, is do everything you can, because you may not know that you need this until you absolutely need this. And so that's what it's always interesting to see. We had 22,000 last year, and 17,000 of them actually enrolled at an eligible institution. So that's the one thing that's nothing else surprises me more than that number.
I remember historically we had a shortage of community service mentors. Did we not? Historically, in the last couple of years, people that would be mentors or in the community service. So there was an opportunity there that we were going to staff those up, hopefully, to be able to accommodate the students that needed to complete the community service.
So from a mentor perspective, 2 years ago, there was a slight shortfall. So Tennessee Achieves is the one of the 3 that does the mentor recruitment. And so they did have to extend their deadline slightly in anticipation of a shortage. They met their goal. This year, I did not see an extension of the deadline. They recruited, I believe, more than 10,000 mentors. So there wasn't an issue there. And we've, ever since the 2nd of November, there have been two communications, 3, FAFSA, meeting, community service. I know I saw an email just the other day about job shadowing that's coming up in early June. It's job shadowing day across the state of Tennessee. So we, as a mentor, saw that email to send to my students. So shortage of community service, I don't believe so. And I think the potential shortage of mentors has been sorted through. Okay. And then just a review. We did this year kind of shorten this rather than looking at raw numbers. These are in millions. So as 16-17 actual numbers, revenues, expenditures, surplus, balance forward, we are flush, and with a less than originally planned for expenditure as we anticipate at this time for 17-18, we are in a good place. So I won't belabor you with reading the numbers to you. I will if you would like, but
We like being in a good place financially.
absolutely.
I think it's worth letting the board know, and Pete, I hope you'll jump in. We did work with the treasurer throughout session. I think the ultimate goal for Promise should be self-contained sustainability. One, that is shores up Promise, and 2, it lets us ask some other big questions about the lottery that are really hope related. We made admirable progress throughout session. At the end of session, that bill was one of the only bills around that could have been tied to TN Ready because of the way it was drafted. And I would say that, and for a lot of other reasons, we all agreed, let's hold this legislation for now. We're going to continue conversations in the off session, because what it really looks like is getting Promise self-sustainable means probably needing to reach a $1.2 or $1.3 billion threshold, which may or may not occur on its own. Infusions of this reserve with what we have sitting over in the the $110 million lottery reserve by Pete's calculations and others, we could infuse some of that 110 into this account. It significantly speeds up the timeline by years of Promise being self-contained forevermore. Weren't successful at that this session, but that's okay. I think it will probably be a conversation we keep going in the off session.
And we're still in a good place, even without that transfer language going forward. But as Director Krause said, it would push us back another year or two to get to where we want to be. But promised funding is really in a very good place.
Great. Any other questions for James? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, I think we already checked the box on the Tennessee Reconnect grant update, so we will move down to the TSAA update from Mr. Tim Phelps.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Director Kraus, members of the board. At the April board meeting, we indicated for the current year that we would spend about $105.6 million for the year. And as of today, we've spent about $103.5 million, and that's just over to about 63,000 students. We still plan to be around that 105.6 figure, which means that the reserve will be about 500,000 after we fully expended all the funds, and that's the amount that we mentioned at the prior meeting a few weeks ago. The TCATs, they began their final term on Tuesday, and we've asked them to certify their students as soon as possible, so we can wrap up certification for the year, make a final determination of the amount that we've paid, and we should have this done in early June, or at least a relatively solid figure. A few other important points that I wanted to mention. Number one is that we did an updated comparison regarding the percentage for each sector. That was something that was asked at the last board meeting. And really there hasn't been a significant shift from one sector to the next. The Takua schools did have essentially a 2% reduction. The community colleges and the TCATs each had a 1% increase, so nothing significant to speak of. Second point is that we've had multiple meetings with Dr. Emily House and Dr. Jason Lee, who's here today, regarding formulating a methodology to determine in the future how much we spend based on essentially looking at student demographics from the FAFSA, looking at the take-up rate essentially on a weekly basis, and making a more accurate prediction of the amount that we'll spend based on that awarding process. And Dr. Lee's here if anybody has any questions that they want to ask about that, but that's something that we've worked on the last several weeks. So also we've taken a conservative approach for 18-19. We have stopped awarding for that academic year, and essentially we're at 143%, which is 10% below what the board approved at the prior meeting. Based on initial estimates, we think that we'll spend around the mid-70s in TSA. And as a reminder, we have just over $100 million in allotment for the 18-19 academic year. But what we'll do is essentially look at and reevaluate at the end of the fall semester, if not a little bit sooner, and make a determination. Do we need to go out with more awards? And that'll be our process moving forward. So really the question is what's next, and we've got several steps. We've done some work, but we still have work to do. We will finalize the certification and payment processes as soon as possible for the current year to make that final determination. We're exploring certification deadlines with the institutions. We'll work with the TASFA Advisory Board, the TSAC, to determine what are the reasonable dates that we can set for the program. Continue our work with Dr. House and Dr. Lee to come up with a final methodology that we can use and that we're very comfortable with, and then also use that to determine the best way to spend the funds. We'll also present to the board at the fall meeting a recommendation for the reserve amount, and we'll spend according to what the board approves down to that amount, whether that's we set a reserve amount and spend to that, or a certain figure. And then finally, we plan to dig deeper into the data. We're still paying. We still have funds that we have to disperse to the institutions, so we won't have any final year-end numbers until the next couple of months. But we'll look into that. Look at other factors. I think at the last board meeting we talked about graduation rates and students that are on free and reduced lunch. So those will all be factors that we consider as we move forward. And happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Tim. Questions for Tim?
Just the comment I would make to the board. I think priority Closely linked priorities. Priority one is establishing an operating reserve sufficient for a government program of this size. And the posture we're in now, we will get there. By ending awards for next year, that'll give us a chance to look ahead in November, and then we will disperse more awards for the spring. I'm certain of it, but I also think we'll be able to present you some reserve options that will make you all feel very comfortable, make ourselves feel comfortable that a program that used to be essentially almost a boutique state program that has now grown to $100 million has a durable, secure reserve moving forward. And I do think I want to thank Tim and Pete and the research team with Dr. Lee, who really we've taken a new look at how we forecast, because the reality is something happened this year. It's a good something. It's a bunch of low-income students responding, but we need to understand that better. And moreover, we need to make sure we have a reserve in place that will always be able to cover the universe of possibilities. I'm confident we'll be there in the fall. By then, I think we should be able to have an idea of what the reserve will look like. I think a conservative estimate is probably in the $8 to $10 million range. The reality is it could even be higher. That then will allow us to offer you options to do spring awards that will, I also think closely linked to having a durable reserve needs to be every dime we can get out there. We need to. Trying to accomplish those goals together has been our goal. And again, Tim, Pete, and the research team have been incredible. It's another illustration that the TSAC line is very artificial now, and our teams work together as one.
And I have a quick question on that. Is this the first year that FAFSA you are allowed to use your previous income taxes?
Second year. Prior year. Yep.
Okay. I was trying to think that it feels like that was a big change that also played into the increase that we saw.
If I had to guess when we dig into the data, and Dr. Lee loves when I guess on the record, I bet it's going to end up being a bunch of things. Mm-hmm. It's going to be the second year of prior year. It's going to be the fact we have a FAFSA campaign that's literally number one in the nation. It's going to be the fact that this was the second year that the deadline was moved into October. We started FAFSAs earlier. And then I think it's really going to be, we're going to be victims of our own success, because Diane and her team, not every state has 8 people who all they do is go to high schools. And I saw that Tuesday. I was in Hardeman County with 2 of our outreach specialists in Bolivar, and they are tracking seniors name by name. When you wage that kind of tactical ground offensive, to go back to my Army terms, I think that it's probably inevitable. You just start to increase the universe. It's great news. We'll have a really significant fiduciary duty, though, we need to exercise as well.
Yeah,
just a quick question. So are we looking at kind of a formal action to take on, over award policy and so forth in September? Is that what we're looking?
That's traditionally when we've done it.
Right.
Yes, in the fall, along with the recommendation for the reserve amount.
Yeah, I didn't know, in light of, the fact we had the special call meeting, on the reserve amount, I would ask that we at least consider a bit of a phase in, so in other words, let's figure out what our target is, and let's see what it would take if we did it all in one fell swoop and try to get the reserve right to that amount quickly, or if we could look at what would it take over 3 years to make sure we get there. And the only reason I say that is that we're currently not funding all the students eligible. And so the only way to do it is going to be to take it away from some students who may be getting some aid this year and then may not get it this year because we cut it off earlier to build up the reserves. I'm just saying all that ought to come into how we think about it, because if we agree, because I'm thinking 10 million seems incredibly reasonable. It's 10% of the fund. I mean, you guys come up with your analytics to get to that number, whatever you need to do. But to do 10 million in 1 year means we're going to have to cut out a certain population of those who probably are currently receiving and won't get it next year because we're trying to do that. So if we could look at multiple things, look at maybe what would it take to do it in 1 year, how many students would maybe not get funding who got funding, and then 2, what would a phase in look like, and would we be comfortable with hitting that goal in 3 years or hitting that goal in 5 or something? Just
scenarios.
Yeah, scenarios on it, just to consider them.
So that makes me wonder. Thank you. So is it not the case that if a student gets TSAA in year 1, that they are somehow prioritized for year 2? to receive
They are.
that
They're
dollars?
prioritized for it,
So-
right?
They're prioritized. It's not
Yeah.
guaranteed, but they're
Well, they're the renewal students as when
yeah.
they receive the award, then when they apply, and if they apply by the deadline,
Right.
then they're automatically awarded as we go along.
Okay.
So the
Okay.
renewals, there would never be a student unless they just
Who's caught
didn't
without
apply.
money.
Yeah,
Okay.
who would miss out.
Okay.
And to answer or to address your concern, Claude. So if essentially, and we can talk more about this obviously at the fall board meeting, but if we do a 10 million-ish reserve, then we're looking at the level that we were at for 16-17, around 90, 91, 92 million, since we have about 100 million this year. So we really obviously there would be $10 million worth of students, if you will, that would take a hit, but we're going to be in the neighborhood of where we've been a year ago, essentially. So,
Yeah, exactly.
and
You
we
know,
had-
what I do realize is that with what the governor gifted the program this year, we have a net of 3.2.
Correct.
So that'd be a great start. You know, I'm just thinking that there's 3.2 that we didn't have that we could still say we don't have that can go into the reserve or something. But anyway, just think it through a little bit. I mean, because back to, Mike's point, we definitely want to get as much money out there as we can, but we want to be reasonable about it, and we want to get the reserve built up. And so I'll defer to, what you all come up with scenarios as to whether or not you think we need to do it in 1 year or do it in 2 or 3 or something.
Yeah, we can do both of those.
Charles.
Well, and we may see something different for 18-19 than we did in 17-18 because they're not using they used 2015 twice.
That's right.
They used their 2015 tax returns twice for 16-17 and for 17-18. So for 18-19, they're using their 16. So those that did file and for 16-17 and got TSAA
right.
and got priority, they were using the same exact tax returns. So you're looking at, if there wasn't a change in income, you're thinking, that's another possibility of an anomaly based on, what we even saw in schools is that, they were using it twice. So it did change even how we did things institutionally with some of our funds as well.
Fair point. Thank you.
All right. And now a communication services update. Diane Lejean will provide that for us.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Director Kraus. I'm providing an update on the most recent initiative that the Communication Services Division, specifically the outreach team, will be working on for the 2018-2019 academic year. As you may know, there are 19 distressed counties in Tennessee this year. Mr. Kraus has asked us to work with Lou Hanneman at TSAC and to make a concerted effort to increase communications about higher ed opportunities to the high school students as well as to the adults in these communities. We met last week after TASFA to begin formulating our strategy in each county. At this time, we believe that in addition to the courtesy visits, the financial aid presentations, the FAFSA Frenzy events, speaking in the personal finance classes, and our work in the spring with the juniors and their parents, that we would like to plan, in conjunction with the high school counseling staff at each of the schools, a one-day college and career summit at the 28 public high schools in those 19 distressed counties. We are planning to meet next month. We're bringing everybody in off of the road and meet with Mr. Hanneman to share the plans that we have prepared for this upcoming school year. We are in very early stages of planning, but at this point I can try to answer any questions that you might have.
Can I give some background too, Diane?
Definitely.
So as you may know, we have these 19 counties in Tennessee that have just been often impervious to any intervention, and we just can't get them to move their numbers. And so as we sat here at THEC and TSAC and thought about the next steps, I think we feel comfortable. And by the way, Ms. Hayes, one of them, as you know, is Haywood County. We feel comfortable if you're triaging resources saying these 19 need it more. Diane and her team do literally hundreds of thousands of miles in a given year. We're okay with doing less miles to Williamson County, perhaps. We'll still go there. Absolutely. But if you've got some extra time to now be budgeted because you've triaged your time elsewhere, we're comfortable saying it's going to go to one of those 19 counties. And again, I mentioned Tuesday we did a visit to Hardeman. If you've not been to one of these distressed counties, I encourage you to visit. The economic recovery has not reached these counties. And by the way, the work that is being done by Diane and her team, I think, is directly related to us stemming the opioid epidemic. We hear that every county we go, the only way to solve the opioid epidemic is probably through education. So we're really excited about it. I've had a chance to visit 3 of the 19, and my favorite part about going there is when I walk in with one of Diane's team members, everybody knows them. And they say, "Oh, hey, how are you?" The principal knows them. The school counselor definitely knows them. And we've just got these great TSAC team members that live out of their cars. They spend their time in high schools with students. I think we will move the needle with this Distressed County initiative, and really grateful to kind of the entrepreneurial approach you guys have taken.
Thank you.
And I would just like to say, we in rural West Tennessee are so grateful for the extra efforts that you're making. And also, the Gear Up program has had a tremendous impact, I know, in Haywood County, and I know throughout the other counties that have participated in that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Diane. And now Peter Abernathy will provide a budget and legislative update.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. The next section over item E, just as a recap, and most of this information has already been discussed to some extent this afternoon. The $10 million increase to the TSAA program was approved. As Dr. Presnell mentioned, this is offset by the $6.8 million reduction that had been funding TSAA from the lottery funding. So that has gone away. The good news, though, with that is that 6.8 now, instead of going to TSAA, will stay with the Hope Scholarship. And when that is not expended at the end of the month or at the end of the year, because our revenues are greater than our expenditures, that will then go to the Promise Reserve as part of the annual sweep. So that increases the amount that is in the Promise Reserve, which increases earnings and hopefully will shorten the time frame. Or will shorten the time frame to the point when we are self-sufficient in the Promise program. So that's really good news, I think, on both fronts. But that does give us a net of a $3.2 million increase for TSAA, which is another 1,800 students or so. Of the legislation that we were concerned with throughout the session, the first was Senate Bill 1840, House Bill 1969. This was just some cleanup language that was needed to help some schools that had been accredited by an accrediting agency that at least at the time we were putting information together for the General Assembly, that accreditor had been unrecognized, if you will, by the U.S. Department of Education. So we didn't want to leave those 6 schools without eligibility for the TSAA. So we changed the language to allow them to continue eligibility. And then the others were affecting non-traditional and reconnect students, some things that needed to be changed to benefit those students as we transition from non-traditional to reconnect at the 2-year schools. And then the last was removing satisfactory academic progress as one of the terminating events for Reconnect. This leaves the degree or 5 years as the terminating events, and this was brought to us from the institutions as a recommendation. So we added that to the bill. As again previously mentioned, Senate Bill 2259, House Bill 2114 enacted the Complete College Tennessee Act. That was the one that would have incentivized students to take a minimum of 30 hours in a 3-semester period, so to help them stay on track to graduate within 4 years at the 4-year schools. Ultimately, that did not pass. And then Senate Bill 1502, House Bill 2426 was this bill that would have transferred funds from the lottery reserve to the promise reserve. Again, that did not pass, but we hope that next year we'll get a better start on that, head start, and with the familiarity of it already there with many of the legislators, we hope that something can come of that next year. And then finally, our sunset review is up this year. The performance audit that was conducted during that cycle came back with no audit findings, and we were approved for another 4-year extension through the year 2022. And that is a recap of both the budget and legislative items.
Great.
I got a couple questions on the. Of course, there was, ACICS has now been reinstated at this point by the secretary, although we'll see what happens.
Right.
And I happen to serve on the body that removed the recognition, so I'm on the SEAKI. So we're going to be looking at that issue. I'm curious, so how many of the institutions that were accredited by ACICS that were extending their eligibility are actually in process of being recognized by another accreditor? I would assume
there are 6 institutions that are TSA eligible that had ACICS accreditation, and
Okay.
I believe I have to look at Tim, 2 or 3.
Yeah, there are two, I think, that had already started the
through other, finding another accrediting body.
Right.
Yeah.
And the language that we put in simply states that as long as they maintain accreditation by an accrediting agency that is recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, they can maintain. So that would encompass ACICS as well if they go back, if they continue recognized. Yeah.
Okay. The other question I had was in relationship to the removing of the SAP. So the Reconnect students don't need to maintain satisfactory academic progress in order to maintain the Reconnect grant. So in other words, they could potentially lose Pell eligibility, but they'd never lose Reconnect eligibility?
I believe that's the situation. Again, yeah.
The justification was the returning student.
You might, in case others are on the phone, they probably can't hear what you're saying.
The justification for removing SAP was for the returning student who is not maintaining SAP when they return. So the way that section of the law was written, that student would have automatically been disqualified from eligibility. So the student would not have been able to, so initial eligibility would have established, and then at the first review, regardless of the student's performance, the student would have been ineligible due to the reference to SAP.
Okay,
that was in the law.
But of course, if they don't get up above SAP, they can't graduate.
Correct. So
the institution will not grant them a degree. So I'm trying to figure out. I mean, SAP is satisfactory academic progress toward a degree. Yeah. If you're underperforming, then you can get the money, but maybe not get the degree. I'm lost.
Well,
so at the end,
I think it's partially about an institutional role in enforcing SAP, which institutions do as a matter of course now, rather than also embedding that within the Reconnect requirement.
At the end of the academic year, though, you do have to maintain a 2.0 grade point average. So at the end of that year, so you start the year, you're going to receive it for at least 1 year. If at the end of that year you do not have a 2.0 grade point average, similar to promise requirements, you would at that point become ineligible.
Okay, so this is really, you're talking about an eligibility determination, not an ongoing determination. Okay, gotcha. Okay, that helps. Thanks.
The clarification.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure that out.
Great. Any other questions for Peter? Do you have one? Oh, okay. All right. And then lastly, for our discussion items today, we have an audit update from Ann Collette.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just add to what Pete said about the Sunset Performance Audit, that this was an audit of the higher ed entity. So it included TBR, UT, THEC, and TSAC. So we thought it was a really good audit. We had no findings, so that was awesome. The other thing I wanted to mention was that the annual audit, the financial compliance audit for TSAC is underway for fiscal year 17, and that's a typo in the handout. It says 18, it should say 17. And our auditors are actually here today. The two auditors, they're sitting there, and Aaron Jewell, our audit manager. So they've been taking notes of everything that's been said. So I really don't have anything else to add other than the audit committee will meet later in the year, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, and don't want to gloss over the fact with an enterprise spanning $500 million and as many moving parts as we have, a clean performance audit with no findings is huge. That's a testament to our staff and those that aren't present in the meeting. I watched virtually every sunset hearing this year, and very few state agencies appear with a 4-year clean performance audit. Very proud of our team. We'll, of course, yeah, that's a clap. We can clap for that one. And Ann's work in just making sure having a good audit isn't about having a good audit. It's about doing the right thing all the time, and then an audit capturing that. And I'm looking at Aaron for confirmation. And Ann does a very good job of risk management and an ongoing evaluative process. So when it's audit time, nobody's freaking out. We're going to keep doing what we do every day and then interface with auditors throughout that. So thank you, Ann, for what you do.
Ann does a great job, and what a great chair.
That audit, that was the reason for the clean performance audit. They heard Sharon was the chair.
Big shoes to fill here. I'd like to make a note that the ladies get it done. That's all I've got to say.
There you go. There you go.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yep.
Absolutely. Is there any other business for today that we need to take up? Okay. Seeing no further business, thank you so much to the THEC and TSAC staff that put this on, and just for the work that you do every day. It's incredible the way that our state continues to lead, and I know the governor is very appreciative of all the hard work that happens here, and so just thank you for your leadership. Seeing no further business, I call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Seconded.
Great. With that, we are adjourned.
Good to see you.